In this video I'll look at rapid processing of an astro images using Photoshop, just using levels and curves to bring out details, plus a few other tricks. So first step, here we had our first image, which was a stack of 9 60-second images of M42. And you can see that the image quality is reasonably good, but of course the light pollution, this bit should be quite dark, grey or almost to black, but it is completely red. We need another window showing, which will be, if I have a look, we need layers. That's the one, so we'll leave that one hiding down there. Info can be useful. Pop that one over there. Where's it gone? Come back. Leave it there for now. Okay. So one of the very simple operations I do is to just look at levels and curves. I'll move this over just a little touch. Now I learned shortcuts for these things. I can't remember where levels is in the menu system here, but Control L for levels brings up this. You can see as an RGB curve it is rather camel shaped because the red is over. You can get it to display color histograms, but not to worry about that too much. But the first thing is to note that nothing is completely black. This would be completely black at this end and completely white. So if you're in trouble if lots of stuff goes right to the end, because that then implies that you completely burned out the image, your exposure was too long. But you don't want this region to the left here. So first step is drag that slider over. Don't get it too close to the bottom of that curve, but straight away things are improved, and click OK. So at this point I think I'm going to have a look at the color balance. So up to image, adjustment, color balance, and the red, green and blue can be adjusted. If I just whack the red down quite a lot. Now we want to look at the background in the corners and see if it goes towards black. Now if we go too far it gets a peculiar greeny hue, so we might try that. And then if you hover around in this region and then look over to the RGB info, if I go right into the dark corner there, it's red 38, green 30, blue. So the red is still, there's still more red. We look here, it's red 66, 57, 55, so we could knock the red down even a little bit more. So just by experimentation, it's getting there. We're not going to get too hysterical over it, but that looks a little bit better. Now we see markedly in the corners there is vignetting, that because the light flowing through the camera telescope combination, stuff towards the corners, the four corners of the image, you get less light than you do in the center. So an image does tend to naturally get darker and darker towards the edge. Now there are ways of getting rid of that, and that's where the magical art of darks, flats and bias frames comes in. Quite simply, a flat frame is taken, and what that does is it is a photograph, it's a record of the vignetting, and then you use software to subtract the flat frame from the data frame, which is called the light frame, and miraculously these dark corners disappear. With color images it's quite tricky. With monochrome it works very easily, and this is one of the reasons why the more advanced astrophotography, you use a color camera and you put red, green and blue filters in. But there are software tricks for getting rid of that a little bit as well. I'm not an expert at it, but we'll have a quick look. Now the next thing I tend to do is to do curves, and for some reason the shortcut for that is Control M. It's a bit more difficult. Can't have Control C because that would be for copy. But this then now shows us an overall histogram, and you can see that the camel shape has gone because I've pulled the red down to the left, and away we go. Now if you click around on, if I click on the image here, you can see flashing in the top corner up here is a little circle, and as I move down, getting darker and darker and darker, it moves down that slope. So this is the dark region of the image and this is the bright region. So we want to enhance the fainter stuff, so we want to drag this curve upwards thus, but notice we're now going to blow out the core even more. If I pull that back again, the core gets really oversaturated. We don't want to do that too much. So sometimes a nice trick is to say I don't want to brighten this bit. So if I click there and look where the little circle is, and then click in that position. Now that means if I drag around here, I have frozen that, I've locked it in place, so I can mess about with the curves for the darker bits but not mess around with the bright stuff. Now I've got two of these which I don't want, so I'm going to drag that one off the screen and just pull up the brighter bits. In the same way as I've locked that bit, I can get the bottom of the curve where it's dark and just say, well, don't overdo the dark, so pull that bit a little bit back, and we get this. You can spend hours fiddling around with this, but we'll just use that simple version for now. Now as soon as you've done that, it's a good idea to go back to levels, and you see you've definitely got a gap between the bottom of the curve and the 0 point, so we can get a little bit more data. Do not go into, be tempted to go up like this. The image looks quite nice, but you're now losing all that information that's in this part of the curve. So always keep that triangle away from there. The white point can be adjusted, but it's obviously going to mess things up there. You can fiddle around with the midpoint sometimes just to get an overall darkening effect without losing any of the, and in an astro image often the faint stuff is right in this region here, so you don't want to lose that. So click OK again, and let's just try a little bit of another Control M for curves. Investigate, that is there. You might notice it's come down a little bit, so I'm going to lock that in place. I don't want to change the corners, so if I click here you can see that's that position. Let's repeat that. So I might lock that and then just see what happens if I enhance the mid-range, which is bringing a little bit of data. You don't want to get it going back underneath, so it's a good idea to just keep most of the points above the line. You can use below for tricky things. Now this is, the detail here is coming out really quite nicely, so I'm happy with that. Back to levels. Now you can see there I'm actually on the point of the bottom of the data, so I want it a little bit darker just because I want it darker. There we go. And we have enhanced the image quite a lot. Now there's a series of tools that I use in Actions. I had to pay for these. They're by a chap called Noel Carboni, Astronomy Tools. It's about £25 or something. And the one which I find most useful is local contrast enhancement. So if we have a look at the image as it stands now, choose local contrast enhancement, and go down to the selection. You can do a whole lot in sequence and then hit that, but you've got to really know what you're doing. So the screen will go blank for a bit, but see how it improves things. Off it goes. It's doing magical stuff, and here we go, it's come back again, and the dark bits in these dust lanes are enhanced. There's more contrast. This little bit here is, I'll change to the arrow pointer, this little bit here, I think if we were to compare it with the old version, you'd see that's more visible. A lot of the detail here is more visible, so that's going quite well. Enough with that. You can try it a second time, but that tends to often overdo things. Now there you might spot a donut or a dust bunny. That's as in Bugs Bunny, dust bunny, and that is a bit of dirt that's on the camera, the window. Over the sensor in the camera there is just a plain plate of glass. The infrared on this camera filter has been removed, but they put just a plate of glass over it, very thin piece of glass, to stop dust getting actually onto the CCD surface itself, but that will cast a shadow. Now flats, if we did flats, that dust bunny would be on the flat, so when you subtracted it from the image, that would go as well as the vignetting. But let's just have a simple rough and ready attempt at getting rid of the corner vignetting, and the way I do that sometimes is to use this lasso tool. I think that's called the lasso tool. Yeah, the lasso tool, and you start somewhere and draw a kind of loop around the stuff that you don't want to change. So it's kind of, I can see detail around there, and I want to keep this bit to the right, and when you join it up, there we go. Now that's selected this piece in the middle, which we don't want to operate on. We want to operate on the non-selected bit. So we go to select and inverse, which now is this bit here, and then if I go filter, gradient exterminator, this is another little bit of add-on software, medium aggressiveness and detail, click OK and see what happens. That has now improved things a lot. There is still some dodginess in the corners, but I think that's good enough for now. If we now remove the selection, deselect, we have now quite a nice image. You can then go back to levels, and we can see that it's shifted over. So back again to the bottom of the slope, and then Control M for curves. I don't want to mess that up, so lock that bit in place and just enhance the middle bit. Now we've got the vignetting is really not great, but that will have to wait for another day. This detail now is quite nice, so we're going to stop there. And I'm going to call that, it was called M4201. I'm going to now call it M4202. Good idea never to save it under the same name, because you think, oh, that looks lovely, and then you look at it again 10 minutes later and you think, no, I don't like it. I want to go back to 01 and process that again, and if you've saved it under the same name, then you've lost it. TIFF image, don't work in JPEGs. It's not great. I don't worry too much with the DSLR about using raw images. The image quality is better if you use raw, but TIFF is fine, and that's that image done. Now let's go and think about the core. We can't see any detail in the middle there, but remember we put some of the 5-second images, I think we called, there it is, M42 core. Let's have a look at that. There it is. Obviously no detail in the back. Now we want to get that core bit in the middle and copy it over and plonk it onto that bit there, but we want to feather the edges and blur the edges so that we don't get an obviously ridiculous cut and paste job. So there are various tricks with this. Some software you can use beforehand to get the stars in this image lined up in exactly the same place as the stars in the other image, but we will do that by a fudge. The way we'll work this is to copy this image. I'm going to select it all by saying, no, let's go over to the arrow thing so we don't accidentally draw a lasso on it. Control A for select the whole image, Control C for copy, minimize that, click on this image and then paste, Control V, and there it is sitting on top. You can't see anything of what's underneath, but here we've got layers, and I can go to opacity and reduce that, and we can now see both. I can wave this one around and attempt to get it in position, which is really quite difficult. But if I use the cursor keys and I can magnify the image and just experiment, you can see if I'm looking at this star here that the 5-second image is a very tight small little star and the 60-second image is much bigger. So just experiment a bit up and down until you're happy that it's in exactly the right place. There's no rotation. If there was rotation between the two images, you'd be in trouble, but that looks fine. And so a check, I can flip the opacity from 100% to 0 and see whether I'm happy that the stars are in the same position. I think that's good enough. So set that to 100%, and now we do a really clever little trick. So we go to Layer, Layer Mask, Hide All. Now the overlaid image has apparently disappeared, but it's still there. Now we choose one of these icons here. I think it's that one there, which is the brush tool, and this needs to be done extremely carefully. I think that might be a little bit too big a circle, so let's drop it from 618 down to about, let's have 200. Yeah, that might be the ideal. Now again, look at the opacity before you go crazy. If we set the opacity to 100%, let's just go over here somewhere and go whack, you get this horrible great blob. So undo that with Control Z. I'm a great fan of shortcuts. Set that to, let's try just 50%. 49 will do, and click once on there. Yeah, that now shows immediately. You can see, yes, Control Z that out. So we've located where those 5 stars are, or 4 stars. 2 of them are sort of kind of blodged together. So centering on that, if I click there, that's not bad. So 49% is okay, but I'm going to go down a little bit more to about 32. And now that I've seen what happens, I'm going to go up to 360, center it on the trapezium, and click once. Now I think that's not too bad. I'm just going to now go down to 12%. Indeed, I'm going to go down to 8% and just do a few mixes there. There we go. I think that'll do for now. Now when you've done this layer mask trick, it's a good idea to do filter, blur and Gaussian blur. If I reduce this and reduce that, you'll see what's happening. if the size of the radius of the pixels is changed, we can rearrange how rapidly it goes from bright to dark. So we want to make absolutely certain that it's a fairly gradual change. Watch the screen. If I go over to here, that's nothing happening at all, and then we can just bring this down, have a look at the result here, and are we happy with what it's doing? It seems to be reasonably good anywhere in this range. Up here it's hopeless, but down here I think that's going to be good enough. So click OK. Now we've still got the thing as 2 layers, which if we start saving it now, there'll be a bit of a problem. So we right click on background and say flatten image, and now there are no layers anymore. It's one specific image, and away we go. So there we are. That can be saved as version 3. Okay, and if we look at the images, if I go to M4101, I use a program called Fast Stone Viewer for looking at images in succession, and if I cycle through those, you can see that's the unprocessed image, just stacked. That's the stacked version, still horrible things happening around the corners, and that's with the layer burning in the central part. Now you do that to taste. Nobody's going to say, oh, you've done it too much or you've done it too little. If it looks good to you and you are happy with the final result, that's good enough for everyone. So adjust colors and lighting. I'm going to just, with this program, just experiment with the contrast a little bit. I think if you go too much, again, you burn out the center. So creep that downwards until you can see the 4 stars, and it's reasonably good. The image now looks not too bad. So there we go. Simple arrangement for processing an astro image. You can spend hours and hours and hours, and the experts will do 40 or 50 separate techniques. I've done levels, curves, the fine detail enhancement, and a layer operation to do that. So there's about 4 or 5 things I've used. You can go mad and do 60 or 70 of them, but I sometimes think life is perhaps too short. There we go.